All right, thanks, Jacob. As Jacob mentioned, we are thrilled to have best-selling writer Paul Tremblay with us tonight. Paul has won the Bram Stoker, the British Fantasy, the Sheridan Le Fanu, and Massachusetts Book Awards, and is the New York Times best-selling author of Horror Movie, a novel, which we'll be reading from tonight, The Beast You Are, the Pallbearers Club, Survivor Song, Growing Things and Other Stories, Disappearance at Devil's Rock, A Head Full of Ghosts, a truly disturbing novel, and the crime novels The Little Sleep and No Sleep Till Wonderland. This novel, The Cabin at the End of the World, was adapted into the Universal Pictures film Knock at the Cabin. His essays and short fiction have appeared in the New York Times, the Boston Globe, Los Angeles Times, and numerous years' best anthologies. He lives outside of Boston, Massachusetts with his family and has a master's degree in mathematics. So, Paul, before I welcome and before I turn it over to you to read from your work, where does mathematics and horror intersect?
I don't know. I mean, I get that question a lot. I mean, usually when I tell people I teach math, they react more like scared
Right.
over the math part than horror. Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to explain. I think sometimes maybe I approach like my writing more analytically than some, but I don't know if that's just me trying to like rationalize an after the fact connection between the two.
All right, well, I'll buy that. And with that said, I'm going to just turn it over to you to introduce what you're going to read and take it away.
Great. Well, thank you, Paul. So I am reading from Horror Movie, which has been out, for about a year and a half. But it's my most recent adult novel. And if you will indulge me, I'm going to read from a section that I hardly ever get to read from. And it's sort of I don't know how Paul or some other people work out there, especially if it's a longer work. For me, there's always a scene that's like the carrot at the end of the stick scene. It's like, oh, I can't wait to write that scene. And that helps motivate me to get through like the hard middle of the book. Anyway, if you haven't read Horror Movie, this is not a big spoiler. I am reading from one of the screenplay sections. So anyway, so this book, Horror Movie, is about it's about a film that a bunch of 20-somethings tried to make or made in 1993 in the Providence area. A small indie, pretentious, difficult horror movie, my favorite kind. And something happened on set to prevent it from being shown on screen. And now, 30 years later, Hollywood's attempting to reboot it. And who's telling you the story mainly is the man who played a character called the Thin Kid. And you're getting his sort of memories from being on set originally, from what he's dealing with now. But also the whole novel is intercut with the entire screenplay of the original movie. I made this sound way more complicated than it is. But anyway, I'm reading from one of the latter parts of the screenplay. And I've attenuated the section because it goes on probably for like 15 pages. And I'm not exaggerating when I say nothing happens for 15 pages. That's why it's exciting to read. Anyway. There's a doorway arch across the valley of the dining room. Behind the arch, a few feet away, is a plain wall. Dim light shines from the left of the doorway. Carson stares across the room, at the archway and beyond, waiting for it to be filled. He waits and we wait. He doesn't run away. It's not that he's making the typical poor decision that horror movie victims always make. He's not lost within the maze either. He knows the way out, but he won't take it because there is no way out. We too will realize this by the end of the scene. Like us, Carson needs to see what is going to fill the doorway. He needs to see the inevitability. The wait is unbearable. Each second is a dare. Will the Thin Kid step into the doorway across the room now? Or now? Or now? We anticipate. The anticipation is the first horror of this waiting scene. We brace and we need the release. This is a horror movie, and horror movies have rules, don't they? We need the fulfilled promise, the validation. Even if we think we know what we will see, we still need to see it. We've been waiting for the Thin Kid to appear for 20 seconds now. The same image is on the screen. Across the dark dining room, a doorway arch, a molding adorned outlined empty space, and beyond that, a plain wall and a dim light from an off-screen source. Carson's breathing slows and settles into a normal pattern. We start to wonder if we're missing something. And instead of the archway, We stare hard into the room's dark corners and along the walls and behind the dining room table and even at the ceiling. Something must be there hiding, grinning in the dark, watching us without our knowing, and we're scared again, really scared. But we don't see anything other than the expanse of the room and the empty archway. For those of us watching this movie in a theater, we glance at our friends and then a bit more carefully at the strangers near us. Is this movie for real? We wonder which will happen first, the thin kid finally stepping into the archway or a member of the audience shouting something. Who will break or blink first? There is little doubt we're engaged in some sort of battle of wills with the movie, but there isn't a single shout from the audience. Not yet. Then, some of us half giggle to release the tension and incredulity. A low collective murmur builds. Finally, one guy yells, "Boo!" from the back of the theater, prompting a few startled screams, and most everyone laughs. Not all of us laugh, though. Some of us are still staring at the image, realizing something is happening, not on screen, but to us. Still, we stare at the same image of the room and the archway across from us, one image of thousands within the movie. We've been watching and waiting for a full minute, which is an eternity in film time. Some of us get angry. What kind of art house pretentious bullshit is this? We heard this was a fucked up movie, and we want fucked upness. Some of us wonder pragmatically if perhaps the movie got stuck on this frame. We look closer at the image on the screen, attempting to determine if it is frozen. We ask a friend if we need to check with an usher or theater manager or a projectionist. Has any of us ever spoken to a projectionist? Who are we kidding? If anyone watches this movie, it'll likely not be in the theater, but on a VHS tape. Some of us sitting at home try hitting pause and play again to unfreeze the image. Not satisfied, we rewind a few frames to verify the tape is still playing. We might even hit stop and then eject, then pop the tape back in and hit play. We are confused because the VCR's counter's numbers tick and accumulate. This close to the TV screen, we can tell the image isn't static, even though nothing is moving. We can just tell. And we back away slowly, eyes on the television, newly afraid. We've been waiting for 2 long minutes. Some of us in the theater throw popcorn and shout dumb jokes, and this is bullshit, and we're shushed by friends or the strangers around us. Some of us leave. Leaving as a defense. The righteous anger as an excuse to abandon a movie that has been fucking with our heads. Some of us follow the ones who leave because we always follow, even if we want to stay. Some of us at home talk and joke with our friends and significant others, and we try to scare them with a sudden outburst and or shaking them by the shoulders, and we all laugh, then settle, and the image is still there, as though it's waiting for us. We recognize the power the image has in our fear of images. Some of us ask, are they still serious with this? Repeatedly, but some of us say it in a way that means something else. Some of us are legitimately confused and are angry that we are confused because life is already enough of a mindfuck. And why can't our movies be straightforward and simple and delude us with their order? Some of us say it's the dumbest movie we've ever seen. And some of us say this is the best movie we've ever seen. Some of us are at home by ourselves and we turn on the light and think that watching this before we go to bed was a terrible, horrible, no good, bad idea. And it would be okay to stop now because we're too tired for this bullshit. And we still have to get up early for work in the morning. And maybe we'll finish the movie tomorrow and we'll call our pet over to come sit with us. We've been waiting for 3 minutes. This movie is not for everyone. This movie is for some of us. The movie theater settles into easy conversation. We again look around at the strangers near us. We observe them as one might observe characters in a movie, and we decide that some of them are more likable than others. And we are struck by how odd it is that we're there, gathered in rows in the dark. We wonder who the strangers are, who they really are. We wonder what their lives are like and if they're good people. We wonder how many people in the theater have done terrible, unspeakable things. We wonder how many human monsters are there in the theater with us. Some of us imagine looking at ourselves through a stranger's eyes. Is this imagined stranger afraid of us? Should they be afraid of us? Then we look at our friends and our significant others. We wonder how well we know them. And without articulating the following in a direct thought, it's as though our loved ones sitting in a large dark room is a metaphor for how unknowable they really are. We wonder about their secrets. We wonder if they have done terrible things. We wonder if they really knew us, would they still want to be near us? The movie has now achieved the second horror of this scene. The above thoughts are not pleasant nor productive, and to pull ourselves out of the spiral, we have no choice but to engage with the screen again, despite our exhaustion with it. There's the image, the same image. We've been waiting for 4 minutes. The scene has gone on long enough to let the children play, to burn off the nervous energy, the briefly shared mirth and flippancy as necessary aspects of the continuing experience. And we're again ready to participate. We stare at the image and the screen. At this point, some of us have forgotten about Carson and only think of ourselves. Everything is about us, and we realize we are alone even when we're not. Some of us attempt to analyze the image, the empty archway, the expanse of the room between the archway and the viewer, the dim light on the other end, the pool of darkness from which we stare. Some of us attach meaning and metaphor, but there is only one meaning. Some of us fear that when we close our eyes, we'll see this image, and we'll see it when we have nightmares, and worst of all, we'll see it when we open our eyes in the haunted middle of the night. We've been staring at the image too long. How can it not continue to be there when the movie ends? Love the movie or hate it, we will never forget it. Finally, now approaching the 5-minute mark of wait time, is the third horror. We know that Carson is going to die at the end of the scene, whenever it ends. We know that he knows he's going to die. Whether some of us think Carson deserves what it is going to happen to him, it's going to happen to him anyway. We know that what we're watching, what we're experiencing, is Carson waiting for his death. We know death will eventually, in one more second, one more minute, one more year, fill the doorway and stare back at him, as it'll one day stare back at us too. We know Carson's maze of a house is our house. We know and feel the truth, perhaps more viscerally than we ever have before, that we are going to die. The image we have been staring at is a representation of the temporally fickle death trap that awaits us all. We can stare or look away and pretend it's not there, and it doesn't matter because death will fill our next doorway eventually. For some of us, death's arrival will be totally unexpected until it's not. Some of us will get tired of waiting for death, and some of us will want it to hurry up and finally get here for fuck's sake, all the while still being bone deep, pants shitting scared of dying. Then, finally, the thin kid creeps into the archway with his long silhouette. Our eyes are fooled initially into thinking that it's not him, but merely a shadow resulting from some change in lighting. But it is him. His appearance is almost a relief, a balm, as much as his arrival is frightening, because we'd begun to believe and fear our vigil might never end. We're eager to be rid of this horrible glimpse at the madness of eternity. And I'll stop there.
Right. Thank you so much. I'm glad you read that. That's one of my favorite scenes from the book, actually,
Well,
because you do stuff in that scene that a lot of like writing teachers would say don't do. And I'm just curious about do you set out in that scene to kind of break a lot of the rules that would normally govern like how you would present the climactic or a climactic scene in a horror book or movie?
I was definitely I was setting out to break the rules of a movie and more sort of unleash the power of what written word can do compared to a movie. And not to say it's better than not. Obviously, the scene is inspired by some of my favorite scenes that are, that have so terrified me. Like, the movie Pulse. There are times where you're definitely holding a shot for a while. It just scares the crap out of me. That idea of waiting, of the anticipation, and not an anticipation of a cheap jump scare, but of something truly horrifying. So this is the kind of thing that breaks time a little bit. But in a book, you're expected to break time. You're allowed to do it. And I wanted to do it in a way that maybe, if I'm lucky, if some readers really connect with it, that the next time they're in a dark theater or watching something like that, they might start thinking of that.
Yeah.
I didn't know I didn't think if I was breaking writing rules. I'm glad I'm not aware of those.
I want to just remind people that you can put questions for Paul into the chat, and we will surface them for him. So, and if you've been looking at the chat, you probably comes as no surprise to you that a lot of people are responding to the kind of the movie, the film aspect of this, and obviously these days horror is a genre that very much includes movies as well as books. So, what do you think? What lessons can prose writers take from horror cinema and adapt to the page?
That's a great question. Hmm. Because honestly, like when I was thinking about this book and writing it, I'm usually thinking more like I'm trying to unlearn the lessons of watching movies. I feel really strongly, and I don't know if Zadie Smith was the first to say this, but I'll credit her since maybe the most recent. But she's talked about in interviews about writers, you should, if you're writing a novel or a short story, uh, you should be essentially trying to make it unfilmable, or if not unfilmable, have to be fundamentally different. Like you chose this form to tell the story. This is its, you should try to make it the best form for it to be, and not just write basically like a treatment for a screenplay. So I kind of take that to heart. Like I think about that. So mixed in with this novel was a little bit of a recognition as like, hey, like I'm sure many of the students out there, which is a cool thing. Like my degree was in math. I didn't study English. I didn't get an MFA. I don't even think I never even took like a creative writing class. Um, and I came to reading for pleasure kind of late. Like, and I don't mean this is like an anti-intellectual thing. I have a point. Um, I didn't fall in love with reading. Like I read as a student because I was like, a good mousy high school student who read all these signed books. But I wasn't like a big reader for pleasure. I was a child of the 80s who came home and watched cable TV and listened to records. And I didn't fall in love with reading until like my early 20s. So anyway, when I fell in love with reading and first started writing, I had this real sort of lack of self-esteem and uh, agita over the fact like, oh man, I haven't read like all these books. I'm always playing catch up, which I think helps me. Like, so since the mid 90s when I started reading, I read 60 to 80 novels a year. Um,
Wow.
and for my formative years, from like ages, let's call it like 5 to 21, my what I knew of story was almost exclusively from film and television, like based on the amount that I consumed. And it's, when I sat down and wrote this book, like I was very aware that it's like, oh, that's totally flipped. Like certainly in the last 2 decades, I read way more books than I watch movies now. I really don't watch that much. I try, maybe I get to watch 4, 5 a year, 10 at the most. So I'm reading more than I'm watching. So like, this book for me was like I wanted to play with, hey, what did I learn and what did I have to unlearn from watching too many movies, but at the same time, like what's cool about both, and some of that's like a subconscious thing where you just sort of play with it. So yeah, I mean, I purposely, there's a screenplay, but I also purposely wrote the screenplay in a way that no executive in Hollywood
Yeah.
would ever accept as a screenplay. Um, yeah, sorry, that was a rambly answer. That probably didn't even answer the question.
No, that's a great answer. I'm going to jump into the chat and pull a question out. Uh, I spent 20 years in the military and found creative writing to be a powerful way to process those experiences. I'm drawn to horror and surreal tones, and I admire how you use them in your work. If you had to give one piece of advice to a veteran like me on using writing as a tool for healing while still creating compelling stories, what would it be?
Wow. Well, thank you. I'm honored. What a great heavy question. So the hard part is what draws everyone to horror is like so individual. So I think it's great that uh, you know that they know so that they're healing that way. I'm laughing because for me, like I wrote a book called The Pallbearers Club, and I thought that was going to be me healing. Like I wrote that in like 2020 and 2021 when I feel like I came to the realization, it's like, oh, like so many people, I had such a shitty time in high school. I think I write because I'm always trying to prove like all those people, like I had something worth saying. So I
Right.
thought this book might get that out of my system. I mean, I'm really proud of the book, but it did not get that out of my system. There was no healing. Like for me, I mean, that's a lot of pressure to put on your writing, I would say. I mean, if it does that for you, that's great. But also I would say don't feel bad if it doesn't heal you. Like to me, the point of art, the point of writing is communication between you and another human. Even though like we're writing about really dark, dark things and, terrible things, it's still, I find it hopeful because there is that shared communication between the writer and the reader. And that's a hopeful thing to me. Whether or not it heals people, I mean, I think hope always does heals people, but it makes me feel less alone when I read a book that I really love. Because like, oh, this person, they get it, that they feel sort of the same things that I feel that I couldn't describe other than saying, hey, read this book. That's the description of how I feel. That's sort of what continually draws me to read and also to write.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, it's the communication with another human being that is the purpose of if you want to say that writing has a purpose, I mean, it is an act of communication, of reaching out to another or others. But at the same time, it's a process, it's an internal process in you as the writer, and something is being worked out or something is taking place. I mean, I know, for example, with my own work that I often feel, I set myself a challenge, I accomplish it, and I feel like I've leveled up or something, not just as a writer, but as a human being. Have you ever felt that?
Oh, 100%. You said essentially what I was going to mention. So George Saunders wrote a book called A Swim in the Pond in the Rain.
Great book.
In that book, he breaks down like a bunch of Russian short stories. But somewhere in there, he talks about something what exactly you just said, like the idea that you work on this thing, and this thing that you complete is in some way better than you are. I mean that's a little bit glib, but like the idea that like it says it better than you could at any moment. Clearly, as I'm like just rambling in this moment, but it is. It's like especially if it's a novel. I spent 12 to 15 months on the draft, and then another 3 to 4 with the editor, and put all this time and energy into it. And I'm proud of this thing that says things that I never thought that I would have the emotional language to say. And so that's the exciting part for me. One of the exciting parts for me is about the writing is you build this thing that is you, but also is like represents hopefully like the best parts of you. Again, it can still be like horrible things are happening. It's not going to be perfect. But yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for that answer. Jacob, do you want to step in?
Yeah, sure. We're getting a ton of questions in the chat and stuff, and I think I'm going to try to combine a lot of them into one general question for you here. What is your writing process, and why did you get into horror in the first place? And how does that process evolve? I'm asking 3 questions in one question here, but there are a lot. How does that writing process evolve as you have published book after book and stuff? Does it become easier? I think a lot of people are just kind of curious. How does Paul do this?
Yeah. Why horror? It's so hard to answer. It's just something I've had like a love terrified relationship with since my earliest memories of media are seeing like as a 4 or 5-year-old, maybe like Disney Rescuers or something, and some of that was scary, but Creature double feature for any older New Englanders, but also at the same time, like I'm still like pretty much afraid of the dark in like a kid way. Like now that my kids are older, if I'm in the house by myself, a lot of lights are on, or if I have to sleep by myself, like because my wife was on a work trip, there's a 50-50 chance like her desk lamp or her nightstand lamp is still on. I mean, it's in one hand, it's in one way, it's like it's awful to live like that, but it certainly helps the horror brain. As far as process goes, I mean, the last answer is easy. It doesn't get, yes and no. I guess it gets easier, but it doesn't really. Like to wit, the book I'm working on right now has bashing my head off the desk. But that's okay. I say this, and it's when it's easier to say out of the mind. I want it to be hard because I feel like it would be easy, that would mean I'm going through the motions somehow, right? Like it wouldn't be worth. If it was easy, would it be worth spending 12 to 15 months on it? I know other writers write quicker and other writers write longer, but it's supposed to be hard. It's easier only in the way there's like, oh, I've done this before, so I can do it again. But I spend more time thinking about trying to make each book feel subtly different. Like I'll even just do goofy things to fool myself into thinking it's different. Whether it's every book gets its own notebook. It's an excuse for me to buy like little cool notebooks. Some books I write outlines for, some I don't, some I just outline a little bit. I try to have that balance of like the confidence. Hey, I've done this before, but also I want to remind myself that, hey, whatever I do for this next book, it's starting over, it's brand new, and everything I do has to serve this book in some way. But generally, when I sit down, I wish I could write longhand. I can't. Like when I'm actually writing, it's all typing. But I do keep a lot of notes. I'll take like character notes and just little notebooks like this. This is still actually my notebook for Head Full of Ghosts, which I keep close by. So just a lot of like random notes for like that. And as we were talking before we let everybody in, I've been a high school math teacher for 30 years. So there are ebbs and flows to how much time I have writing. But when I am working, I still try to write most every day. And if that equates to 5 out of 7 days, that's okay. Like I give myself permission to miss days when life happens. But I try to steal an hour a day, hour and a half. And then the off days, maybe I'll go for 2.5. And I know on the math side of me is like, hey, that accrues. If like you do that summation adds up. And that's just kind of how that's where maybe the math part comes in. I just think about it that way.
Awesome. Well, thank you. That answered many questions in the chat, and I appreciate that. And so does our audience, I'm sure. Folks, if you have any other questions, keep posting them. I'm going to pull one from some pre-scripted ones that we've had. Are there common pitfalls that you see in new horror writers that they fall into, and like what habits or areas of focus tend to help writers grow within the genre? Because you were talking about like your habit of stealing an hour to a time away, having that kind of fear built into you where even when your wife is gone, it's like, oh, I gotta keep the light on, everything like that. So that certainly can help with your craft. But what other habits can horror writers form to, I guess, continue to thrill and scare the audience and make them want to read it?
Right. So like I think a little bit what we talked about before is like, don't imagine that you're writing like a movie. Like, if an editor or someone says, oh, it's the movie in your mind, I would kind of like avoid getting writing advice from that person. Like, no, writing is a different thing. It's even, reading, like when I read aloud, like I crossed out some sentences and some words, and it's not because they weren't edited. It's just, it reads differently in your head than it does when it's aloud. And that's just like a small change. Like, so one, like, don't write treatments. I mean, pay attention to the sentences. Easy to say that I'm becoming rustier and older. I mean, those basic things, I think that helps people really stand out. Like if it's a really, really well written, really beautiful sentences, you can get away with a lot more. Like when I say get away, you can maybe get away with a story that doesn't have a happy ending. Like I think people will be more willing to go with you into strange places if they're like, "Whoa, this is really cool. This is a really well written book." Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I hesitate to give too much because I don't know if I have a lot of advice. I mean, it's just so hard nowadays. I mean, it's very exciting because horror is doing so well, and I don't think there's ever been a time where as much has been published. And even there's never been a time, and we can still do way better. There's never been a time when we've had as many diverse voices, publishing.
Right.
Really, I mean, I think, if you're a new writer, just the thing you should be focused on, and this doesn't mean you're necessarily taking stories from your life and writing horror novels, but your job is to filter your experience into the story. This could go for anything besides horror, but you're trying to filter your experience through. That's what's going to make it unique. If it's a zombie story, no one's heard your zombie story. And that's the hard part, the part that we practice and people are taking classes, and is how you figure out how to filter the you through those stories, because like almost every horror story's been done before in one way or another, but what makes it new is like the writer.
Right.
So says the math teacher anyway.
Well, you said, like, I mean, horror is kind of having this renaissance in both literature and film too. I mean, we're seeing,
absolutely,
them becoming blockbuster, Oscar nominated films and the sorts. But they are two different mediums. But I feel like, there's certainly overlap where a lot of people who want to write horror because they were scared to death when they saw the thing when they were a kid,
Yeah.
or some other thing. So like, what do you think makes fear work differently on the page than on the screen? I mean, pacing is kind of an essential aspect for both forms, right? But how does literary pacing create tension in ways that differ from cinematic tools like jump scares? Because I think a lot of our writers, I think a lot of them often come to a point where it's like, I got a really scary idea, but I just don't know if it's actually coming off as scary on the
Right.
page.
All right. So I'm gonna say two things that your teachers probably may disagree with, and they're welcome to. So I might be anyway. So first, I honestly don't know what scares other people. And I really don't worry. I try not to, I shouldn't say don't. I try not to worry about, is this scary? Because I think that's beyond my control. Like, you know, Jacob, you and I can be like, oh, we can intellectualize, like, oh, that's supposed, that was intended to be scary, but whether
Yeah.
it scares us, I have no idea. So
Right.
I try to focus more on the things that I can control, which is, moving the reader emotionally, disturbing, I think is a little bit more universal. Um, if they're scared, great. Like, I honestly have no idea. On the other part, like, and maybe this is again just me being like a contrarian. It's like, I don't believe in pacing. Like, I don't. Obviously, you guys have degrees. I should say I don't agree with pacing when like when some bookstagrammers refer to it, or like Goodreads people just throw out the word pacing. So I should just say people who aren't invested in story through. Because to me, when people say, "Oh, the pacing was bad," like about a movie or about a book, to me that generally translates into, "Oh, there wasn't enough stabbing and explosions." Like pacing is usually equated with plot. So like as I get grumpier, I bristle at that, because I don't know. For me, pacing doesn't preclude having characterization or other things happening that aren't just like the exciting things. It's probably a little bit semantic. So what I tend to think of it instead is, does this serve the story? Like, does this bit move the story in some way? Does it give you atmosphere? Does it give you important information about the character or the voice or this or that? And then if it doesn't, it's got to go out. And if it stays, that's probably what makes maybe the pacing lag afterwards. So, my fear, to go back to what we were talking a little bit about before, is like my fear again. I think way too many people, just culturally, again, not teachers and not people studying stories, culturally just automatically go, oh, pacing is like a movie. Pacing is these things happen, story beats. Nothing makes me more crazy, especially on the Hollywood side of things, when they talk about screenplays having to have story beats. Like, what the fuck's a story beat? Like, no. Anyway.
All right, well, that's good to know. And yeah, I guess what I see sometimes, like, when you're watching a film and stuff, there's a lot of things that are working with it, like the music for one. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously, I think back to like Friday the 13th, the first one, and how like if that score wasn't in that movie, it would be just a goofy as hell movie. But the
Sure.
score is actually what makes it work. But us writers, we don't have that score. We don't have
Right.
that person doing the sound production, or the moment where it's like, okay, they're walking slowly in, because we never want to resort to saying suddenly, right? Suddenly something
Right.
jumped out of this. And I think that's one of the things that a lot of emerging writers kind of struggle with, is like, how do I get that horror on the page without it being so obviously like, ha, I gotcha, or this is supposed to be spooky and scary, or dead body at you kind of thing. So I
Yeah.
wonder if that's kind of what if you have any advice in that context, rather than just like the overall pacing of
Sure.
of advancing the novel or the plot forward, or the
Yeah.
character
Yeah. Yeah.
development forward.
That's a great way of putting it, and a great question. So with the novels, I found, so like one of my favorite writers is Shirley Jackson. And I think and obviously I'm not saying I'm anywhere near Shirley Jackson, but one of the things I really admire about her work is it feels so, I don't know, like mundane insofar as it's lived in, it's realistic. And then Kelly Link does this too. And then you just have something just be off a little bit, and you don't need the violin sting of a movie. You can just have like, everything feels like, oh, this is real. This feels like, I know these people, or I've been in this situation. You have it feel somewhat realistic, but then you can have the thing that happens, like the lift of the horror story. And I think if you, it's almost counterintuitive. If you work on the things that aren't the horror parts, and if you do that well enough, I think the horror parts have a leg up, because the thing that's been built, scaffold around it has been, it feels more real, right? You're not,
Right.
and that includes like the characters' dialogue, like, things that drop me out a lot of, like, the poorly written horror stories, or it's like, people like crack, because you got to have horror and comedy. It's what you hear from some, some editors and filmmakers especially. So like, this terrible stuff will be happening and people will take the time to have, like, a quick joke or two or something. I don't know, a lot of people like that. I don't. Yeah, I keep blaming horror or Hollywood editor things. Really, my fear of horror, or my fear of, like, does this moment or when this moment ends, it's not the writers, it's the cynical editors and filmmakers. I mentioned it in Horror Movie, like, it came right directly from a meeting with a producer that I had. Who said, hey, we want horror, but it can't be too grim, and we don't want, it has to have a happy ending. I'm like, well, you certainly don't want my horror. And I've been hearing that from some writers about, some of the comments they get from their editors about, oh, it has to have heart, it has to have a happy ending. And listen, like, it's not to say I'm against things that have a happy ending, as long as it honors the experience of the readers and the characters. But for it to become like, oh, this is what horror is supposed to be, like, that's coming from people who don't like the genre, have very little experience with it, and are only doing it now because it's quote unquote hot.
Yeah, that makes sense. Happy ending. I can't even think of a horror movie with a happy ending. I guess, I mean, a happy ending is the bad guy's dead, right?
Well, yeah, I mean,
The
if you
the killing is
survive,
over.
it's happened.
Yeah.
I'm the final girl. I made it, so okay. All right. Well, thank you, Paul. I'm going to turn it back over to you, Paul W.,
Yeah.
to ask a couple more questions.
Okay, I'm going to grab one or two out of the chat, but before I do, I want to ask you something. What you were just saying kind of made me think, like, horror is a genre with a long history.
Yeah.
And we were talking again before we let people into the room. We were talking about, like, Peter Straub, and that a lot of younger writers aren't aware of the work of Peter Straub, and writers of his generation. Even probably Stephen King is the most famous of those writers to still command a huge following. But how important is it, do you think, for writers who aspire to write in the horror genre, or any genre, to be familiar with or conversant with the history of that genre and the writers that came before, as opposed to just, like, reading whoever's hot today and trying
Right.
to model your work after them?
Yeah. I mean, I think, obviously, there are people who are capable of only just dipping in and writing something from a genre. That's fine. I think it could only help you if you were to read a little wider. But at the same time, I would never say somebody would have to be like a completist. I would, just from my own reading experience, like, I haven't read a ton of Lovecraft. I wasn't super into him, but I read enough people who were doing like cosmic horror Lovecraft.
Yeah.
I felt like, oh, I get it.
Yeah.
So so there is that part of it. There is, to maybe ease maybe the anxiety of some people who are thinking, oh man, I haven't read a ton of horror. The cool part is, as you mentioned, the history of the genre. Like, I think of the best stories, not only they fit within the genre, but they fit into the, like, I like to think of horror as like this long century and a half, probably more now at this point, long conversation that you get to join in as both a reader and as a writer. And so, like, yeah, if you're going to write it, why not take advantage of it? I think it is as important, and this is something I work at because I'm in a very lucky spot where I get sent a lot of people's horror books early. So I definitely read a lot of contemporary horror and new horror, but I also try to read other stuff too. Like, I when I'm picking the books that I want to read, aside from like my favorite horror writers, I tend to read sort of like literary fiction that skews maybe a little darker, like, Roberto Bolaño, or Paul Auster, or whatever weird books that I found. Like, geez, last year, one of my favorite books I've read in a long time was by Hallie Hallie Butler, called Banal Nightmare. Man, it was just so damn funny. um, you know, it's just like this plotless book about shitty millennials being shitty to each other. I'm not judging millennials, but the characters are shitty millennials being shitty to each other. And man, it was just so funny in a lot of ways that, like, it feels like this weird horror novel, except it's everything is played for cringy kind of laughs instead of something else. So I don't know. So like for me, like now that I've read so much horror, it's fun to dip elsewhere and be like, oh, what if I did the horror version of that? Like, because I'm always thinking that way. Like the book I just started, I'm hoping there's a little bit of like honoring / riff of some of Bolaño's stuff and Paul Auster and Mariana Enriquez and a few other the books that I'm thinking of too.
Yeah, that Bolaño book, 29.99, I think.
Sixes. Yeah. 2666. Yeah.
Yeah. That's one of the most terrifying books I've ever read.
Yeah.
So yeah. Let me I'm gonna again, like kind of like Jacob did, mash up a few
Sure.
questions from the chat, Frankenstein style. What about as someone who kind of began their career as a writer in really the maybe pre or very early internet era, and now somebody who's writing in what is becoming the AI era, what changes have you seen? How has your approach to writing differed, and what do you see as the kind of the challenges that lie ahead for writers?
So when I first started selling stories in like the early 2000s, I mean, there was definitely a big online component. Well, I would say huge. I mean, there were online zines. That's where I was selling a lot of. People were blogging, live journal. So there was a connection, and it was, I wouldn't have to spend as much time on it like you do now with social media. That to me was like one of the bigger changes. Before we get to AI, is like, the dawn of social media has really changed the expectations of writers in a really unhealthy way, I think. When I say expectations of writers, expectations of what they're going to do if you're working with a large publisher. Like they expect you to be on online. And I hear horror stories from new writers all the time where they just sort of casually mention to me, is like, oh yeah, this agency or this publisher asked me like how many followers I had and I needed to build up more followers first or something. Like, well, how are you supposed to do that? It's a little bit insane to me because so many of us become writers because we're much more comfortable sitting in our little darkish corner, being by ourselves, as opposed to all of a sudden having to be like online performers. It's definitely not healthy.
Or it's choosing for a different, it's selecting for a different type of writer. I often wonder about that, like, because I'm like you, right? I want to be in my little corner typing away, but there are so many other writers that you see really do take to this new environment very naturally and very well, or seemingly naturally, and thrive in it.
No, absolutely. I mean, and listen, if they're talented, like Grady Hendrix, for example, he actually doesn't do as much on social media. But like he's very much got a performance gene in him, and he's a great performer. So like, I just hope that, new writers don't feel like they have to be performers. It might be, you just have to find another way, and for me, I mean, it's a little bit, I don't say easy to say, but like, part of my, I like teaching, but part of my gig that was the artistic safety net. It's like, I'm going to write my weird shit. And if no one wants it, I'll publish it with an indie, or I'll publish it. I still made sure I got paid for everything. That was one thing for sure. Like I was patient. I'm glad I'm not new now, because the urge would be to self-publish. And for the vast majority of people, that's not going to go well for you.
Can you explain a little bit why that would be the case?
To self-publish, because just how easy it is. Like, it takes, it took me 2 years to find an agent, hundreds of rejects. And like, I understand, like, and this is pre-social media. So now, like, if I was waiting around for 2 years, I would go insane by seeing all these people on Instagram or whatever, platform talking about all the great stuff that they're doing. Like, I feel that pressure now. Like, if I look at it for 5 minutes, I'm like, oh my God, I'm not doing enough. Look at what this person's doing. Of course, like, we try to be rational, take a step back, and I'm happy for very happy for all the successes that, my, fellow writers have and stuff, but that messes with your head. So, I know that part of it's hard. Like, the only advice I think that's worth anything is like, not only advice, but only advice that I have that's worth anything is to be patient and to be kind to yourself. And just remember, there's so many different paths to becoming a writer. Um, it does not mean that you have to go on TikTok. My publisher asked me once if I would go on TikTok. I've told the story before. I'm sorry if people out there have heard it, but I still might do this if I'm desperate enough. If I go full-time writing and I need more money, I asked him, could I do a puppet account? I said, a literal puppet account, like make me a puppet that looks like me and I will have it go on TikTok. I went so far as to go on Etsy. You could get a puppet made for like $300. Yeah.
Money well spent and tax deductible for this purpose.
Yeah. I think I went far afield of the rest of the question. That was a good one.
Well,
but yeah.
What about the future of writing?
Oh, yeah.
And
the future,
AI.
yes. So, yeah, I mean, I was even a part of a lawsuit suing OpenAI for 2 years. Myself, Christopher Golden, Richard Cadre, and Sarah Silverman were a part of the first filed lawsuit against OpenAI.
That was the Anthropic suit.
No, we were with OpenAI. That was
Okay.
Anthropic. It's its own sort of AI platform. There's so many of them. It's depressing. But yeah, no, and we filed in June of 23, which was the first writer one against specifically OpenAI. And like any sort of big case, it took forever. And this spring, I had to do a deposition, which I don't recommend. This summer, because there were like 10 different lawsuits against specifically OpenAI, a federal judge consolidated everybody. And so at that point, you don't need all the different plaintiffs. You only need like a certain amount. So like I'm no longer part of the case, which is fine. But yeah, so I've been thinking about the AI thing for a while. So on one hand, I definitely lump it in with, we just talked about saying, hey, you should be writing a book, not a movie. I think about writing something that AI can't do. And if that, whatever that might mean, for me, stereotypically, it means having like a screenplay in the middle of it, or like this next book that I have coming out, it's got like weird interior design of like the text being moved around. And the book that's coming out this coming summer is an anti-AI screed, so that experience goes into it too. So, no, I mean, also it's helped me sort of, I wish I didn't have to do this, but more crystallize like what I think about art and its value and what it means. And it also means telling people it's wrong to use it. Like, I think people, more writers and publishers and editors and even readers, you have to reject it. Like, no, this is not right. You should not accept AI art. You should not use it. You should not use ChatGPT. You're not a writer if you use it. No, that's not an ableist statement, which was originally put out there by OpenAI.
Yes.
Yeah. So it is a battle. It's something that's going to have to be fought tooth and nail.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm sure Jacob would agree with me that this is something that we're dealing with in our programs,
Oh, I bet.
and with our writers, and it's difficult, but we're doing our best, to make it clear, at least in our programs, that it's not a helpful tool.
I appreciate that. Yeah.
To put it mildly. Jacob, do you want to? I'm going to tag you back in.
Sounds good. Yeah. So if anyone has any last questions, go ahead and feel free to post. It seems like mostly comments on disdain for AI, which is,
Yes.
great. Yes. In the meantime, though, I can pull another one from our pre-scripted questions here. So you're going to be interviewing George Saunders next month about his forthcoming novel Vigil. Is that correct?
Yeah, crazy. That's happening.
Yeah, that's crazy.
I just heard him read from that today. By the way, he was reading the opening of it on I guess on his Substack channel for free. So
Nice.
it's like the demented Mary Poppins or something. Anyway.
Well, yeah. So my question was basically, how did that come about?
I'm still not sure. It came. My agent got an email saying, "Hey, both the store, Harvard Square Books, or the Harvard Bookstore, Harvard Bookstore, said, hey, George has asked if you'd be available, or, that's how it got. So listen, I have no idea if someone canceled, if I was the 10th person on his list, but I don't care. I'm just super excited and honored when I first fell in love with reading his book after reading a bunch of Vonnegut. That was sort of like a big deal discovery for me. And then shortly after reading a bunch of Vonnegut, I read George's collection, Pastoralia, which I loved. And that was like, this was like, this is another writer I have to read a lot of. So yeah, if you told the kid who was reading Pastoralia that you would be interviewing George Saunders in 2025, I would say, what a weird year that is. Everything else, I'm sure, in that year would be normal, but what a weird year that is.
That's the most normal thing in this year.
Yeah, right. Well, that's amazing. Well, that's great. Good luck and have fun with it. I'm sure he seems like a really down-to-earth guy from what I've seen. The closest I've ever gotten to him was I went to AWP once, and Syracuse had a booth open, and there were some graduate students sitting around there, and I said, do any of you know George Saunders? And one of them said, yeah, he's my mentor. And that was it. That was the extent of that's as close as I got to fame with it. So so congratulations on that. That's awesome. There was one more question. It came back up, and you've been talking a little bit about, your frustrations with producers and Hollywood and stuff, and especially with like, this horror movie has to have a happy ending and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But you have had your work adapted to the screen, and the questions that have kind of risen are like, how has that happened? How did that come to be?
Yeah.
And I guess also to kind of build off of that, what is your experience with that as it's going into fruition? And like, are there any changes or reinterpretations that like from the movie, from the book, that has reshaped the way that you think about your original story? Or is it more of a kind of like a, what did they do to my story kind of thing? Or,
yeah. So, the short version is because I have a really excellent literary agent, and I've been super lucky that I've been with Stephen for a really long time. When I had my first couple novels published, he went out and got me film representation. So like, which has happened like both times. So I've had two different sets of film representation that came through Stephen. And then the film reps basically, they send the books out there. Sometimes people will come to the agents looking for the books. So yeah, in terms of like, it's so different than like looking for an agent with your book. Like I'm almost doing nothing on the film side. Like they sort of do it themselves, which is great. Yeah. So as far as like the adaptation experience itself was very strange, in a fun way and also in a stressful way. Like I like the movie, but I really don't like the ending. But I kind of like talking about the differences. There's nothing in the movie that I was like, oh, I wish I did that in the book. But there was things, especially in the first half of the movie, that I really appreciated. Things he was able to communicate solely through images about the characters, which I thought was really cool. Like, and it's not something I can necessarily. Well, I suppose maybe I could take some of that for writing. Like when it comes to word choice, if you're working on setting or whatnot. But I more noticed like the film sort of, I was more focused on like, oh, how did this get translated via film? And yeah, so I mean, I knew the movie ending was going to be different for a while. Like for me, the biggest frustration was, them hiding the fact that they were adapting the novel for like the lead up until the movie came out. I still don't understand why it had to be that way. It didn't have to be that way. Yeah, without getting too far into that stuff, that was frustrating. And we don't have like novelists. When I say we don't have a union, we don't have the Writers Guild, we don't have those protections, which makes it hard, which makes what you all do, especially I know you teach writing, but you also help them with the business side of things, that much that important. And that's why I try to be as honest as I can be when people ask me like business questions, or because it shouldn't be a secret. People need to know. because we're not going to learn otherwise. Like we don't have the union looking out for us.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, other things have been options. A lot of things haven't worked out. A Head Full of Ghosts is really close to filming, maybe in early 26. The closest it's been. So knock on wood, we'll see. If those filmmakers get to make the movie they want to make, it'll be really dark and messed up and not have a happy ending. So that'll be cool.
Awesome. Well, on that note, we're already at the hour as usual. This always flies by. But we're so thankful to have you here today, Paul, and sharing your thoughts about horror and reading from your book, Horror Movie. A reminder to everyone who's here, 5 of you lucky attendees are going to receive a free copy of Horror Movie. So watch out on your emails for that. For more about Paul and his work, I'm going to go ahead and post his website into the chat. So check that out.
Yeah.
Paul, thank you again so much for reading for us tonight, for answering questions about the craft, about the industry itself, about the other industry, film industry, and how it relates to our writing experiences and stuff as well. I can just tell from the chat, everyone has been very excited and just thrilled to have you here, and we have been as well.
Well, thank you. This was an honor. I was super happy to be here. I've known Paul for a while, and he's an excellent writer. So I was happy to come and talk writing. And then, as you pointed out, we're starting to look like each other too. I don't know what that means.
Well, as you pointed out, 2 incredibly handsome gentlemen.
That's right.
There you go.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, and really looking forward to your interview with Mr. Saunders, and then your new book coming out in June.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. We'll see you next month, where we'll do our special event dedicated to the 5 winners of the Penman Review Fall Fiction Contest. But in the meantime, I wish you all happy holidays, safe travels wherever you go, and may you have a peaceful and restful rest of your year. All right. Take care, everyone.
Bye, everyone.